We always desire for an easy play, a walk in the park, where we can just pick up that win pretty easily. Well, in reality, winning games so easily is easier said than done. We have to really sweat it out just to get that W. And many times, it stretches the entirety of our chess knowledge, our very brain just to get the winning position, or even win the game. In this video, we'll talk about how to win a winning game, so to speak. We call it piece liquidation. Piece liquidation is simply the act of simplifying the position to our advantage heading into the endgame. Well, normally pawn endgames. Let us check this position. If we were to count the number of pawns, we can see that white has an extra pawn, and there is an ongoing tension in this e-file. Let us imagine that if this is going to be in the endgame, this must be winning for white. Imagine removing all the pieces like this and keeping the pawns on the board. Well, the best move here for white would probably be to make his king more active by playing king to c3, and later on push these pawns and have this capitalized 3 pawns versus 2 pawns in this side of the board, right? So what's the key to this position? Aha! So it takes some pawn endgame knowledge to really think through and recognize the advantage that we got. The key is to exchange the pieces when we can. So, rook takes e7, rook takes e7, rook takes e7, and king takes e7. This is now a battle of minor pieces. But remember, we have to go to the pawn endgames when we can. So, bishop to b4 pins the knight. King to e6, bishop takes d6, king takes d6, and we now just arrive to that dream position that we had. So we have to activate the king. King to c3, and if king e5, we could just play b4. And if this king leaves this square here, for example, to f5, we could just simply play c5 and we have a pass pawn. If, for example, a6 is played, we can just play d3. If king d6, we could play king d4, and there's a push on c5 later on, and again, pass pawn here. A dangerous passer that would give white that full point. So the key is piece liquidation to capitalize on what we observe heading into the endgame. In this position, again, it takes an endgame basic knowledge to analyze if we will have an advantage in this position. Here, the number of pawns is equal. Pieces are also equal. But we can't help but notice that if this is going to transition to the endgame, and we remove some major pieces, this a5, b6, and c5 pawns are somehow locked and are sitting on dark squares. If black is left with a light square bishop, these 3 pawns here could have been an easy target for white. White's king is also closer to this side of the board, so this is going to be a big plus in the endgame. So, bishop takes f6 first, king takes f6, and then queen takes e8, bishop takes e8, and white can actually play knight to e5. And the idea is to get this knight through the c4 square and really threaten this b6 backward pawn on b6, which is actually weak. So rook b8, knight to c4, and for example, bishop to d7. We could play rook to d1, bishop to e6, we can pin that bishop there, and this pawn is going to fall. If king e7 is played, we can just take the pawn, and this pawn that we have here on b5 is going to be a passer as well. If black forces an exchange of rooks, this gives white an easier job here with rook takes, bishop takes, and we could play knight to d2. And again, the idea is to go to c4 and target this b6 backward pawn. Again, picture out the advantage and liquidate. Simplify the position to a better and more advantageous pawn endgame position. In this next position, white is up on exchange, and pawns are actually equal. However, heading into the endgame, we observe that it is 1, 2, 3 versus 2 pawns in this kingside part of the board. White hoped that black would make some mistakes here, so he took on f7. Rook takes f7. The idea is after king takes f7, white can play bishop to a2 check. If king moves to e7, he could play h4 and later on h5 and have a passer again this side of the board. If black goes to king g7, d5 can be played. If d7, bishop d7 is played, we can just play to, uh, bishop to f3. If bishop to e6, we could play perhaps h4 and later on bishop to e2, and we have a threat here. If just imagine and bear with me, if this bishop goes back, this king is going to go to the center of the board, and we have a prey on d6 pawn. So again, this happens with the idea of piece liquidation and part of white. In this next position, this actually happened in a real blitz game. The best move here is actually a simple king to c5, preying on this black's queenside pawns. But because it was a blitz game and white was somehow annoyed with the checks that is going to happen, he made a crazy move here. If we're to count the number of pieces, black has 5 pawns compared to white's double pawns, and another 2 pawns on the side of the board compensated by this, c2 bishop. But white made some crazy move here with queen h7 check. Since this is a blitz game, and white somehow recognized his advantage, he wanted to liquidate the position. So, queen is forced to take that. Queen on h7, bishop takes, king takes, and we have a very good feast in this side of the board. These pawns are going to fall, and white will promote his pawn first. Okay, for example, g6, king takes c6, takes, takes, king g7, king b6, king f6, takes, king g5, takes, h5, king a6, king g4. You know what happens here. And we have a queen there, and this pawn can't move forward freely. So this is a very good plus, a winning position for white. Now I'd like to test your piece liquidation knowledge. Here in this position, you are playing the black pieces. Now it's your turn. Can you play the best move here? Feel free to pause the video and think through. Alright, if you found queen takes g2, congratulations! Now the idea is that after king takes g2, black plays bishop to d5, a fork, thus taking away this weak c6 pawn. If bishop d5 is played, we just take the d5 bishop, and we have an instant passer here. So this is winning for black. In this next test, can you play white and win? Again, just pause the video and try it for yourself. There you go. I bet that was easy for you. Well, there are a lot of ways to win here actually. White can take this pawn on g6. If after this take, we have 2 pawns versus 1 pawn on this side of the board. So an exchange of minor pieces there leads to a winning position. After h4, for example, king to f6 could go to c4 and, capture these pawns here. And we have a very good position for white. Now I have something more challenging for you. Can you play white here? All right. Now, apparently, white is, of course, winning here. And all you have to do is to, execute the right moves and capitalize on what you have. Now, the best move here is actually a7 check. Now, the idea is to force an exchange of queens and recognize that we have an opposition advantage in the king and pawn endgame. If queen takes this a7 pawn, you could just check the king from this side of the board. Queen d8, king b7, queen d7, king has to go back, queen takes, and we could play king c6. After king a6, we have b5, king a7, we have king c7. If king a8, we have king b6. If king b8, we have king a6, king c7, b6. Of course, king b8 leads to, b7 and a winning position for white. If after king a7, king takes that, a7 pawn, we have queen c5. Forces the exchange of queens, and we will not take with this pawn, but we will take it with our own king. King b7 and king b5, the opposition endgame. After, for example, king c7, you just play king a6, king c8, king a7 would lead to this pawn to be pushed, and king c7, b5, and we have a winning position for white. So that's it. Now, the thing is, when it comes to piece liquidation and even other chess valuable lessons.
Hey, check this video out to make sure that you get more important information to bring your chess to the next level.